There are fewer than 500 people on Earth who truly understand the LVMH corporate structure that is rarer than a fighter pilot's license, and most of them are paid to keep the maps secret. Louis Vuitton is a $75 billion empire, but you have never heard its real story. That is exactly how they want it. 170 years ago, a trunk maker walked into a modest workshop in Paris and began building boxes for the wives of the wealthy. His name was Louis Vuitton, and the year was 1854. Within a century and a half, that single craftsman's name would become the dial of an empire worth $500 billion, hiding a movement of capital that almost no one is allowed to inspect. You know the monogram. You have seen the brown canvas on the arms of strangers in every airport on Earth. But the monogram is just the dial. Behind it lies a movement, complex and silent, ticking in a way that rewards those who understand it and confuses everyone else. The question is not how Louis Vuitton became famous. The question is how an empire this vast stayed so thoroughly invisible. Forbes counted 75 coveted brands under its umbrella in 2024. 75. Each one a jewel, each one carefully positioned, each one reporting into a single silent heart. But the story of how that heart began beating did not start in a trunk workshop. It started with a bankrupt textile company and a man who understood something no one else did. A merger formed the group in 1987, uniting Louis Vuitton with the champagne and cognac house, Moet Hennessy. 2 years later, in 1989, Bernard Arnault became the principal shareholder. The man had no family legacy in leather. He had no history in perfumes or couture. What he had was a vision of consolidation that the luxury world had never seen before. Picture the visible world first. A flagship store on a grand avenue, marble floors polished to a mirror shine, the air carrying a faint scent of expensive leather. You walk in and the space itself seems to perform for you. Every surface arranged to communicate a single message. This is not just a purchase, this is an elevation. The canvas on the shelves feels dry under your fingers, and the brass hardware is cool and heavy in your palm. The price tag you barely glance at because you already know what it says, and that number is not really the point. The point is what the object promises to say about you when you carry it out through those glass doors. That store, that leather, that promise, it all belongs to a world most visitors never ask about. Subscribe, and we will keep walking through these hidden doors together, because the invisible empire is only beginning to reveal itself. What detail in that flagship experience first made you sense that something larger was watching from behind the glass? Leave that word in the comments. The full legal name is Louis Vuitton Maletier, a label that reads like a signature from a previous century. Most people have never seen the second word. It sounds almost like an afterthought, a relic of a time when a craftsman signed his work to claim it. And that name, that relic, now operates quite deliberately as a subsidiary of something far larger. You may have assumed it was privately owned, an independent house preserved in amber. It is not. It is one component inside a publicly traded conglomerate, a mechanism within a mechanism. The dial you admire in the store window is beautiful, yes, but it is only the face of a structure that runs far deeper than any boutique's marble floor. Here is what the catalog omits. That leather is not brown. It is coated canvas, and the recipe took a century to perfect, refined through secret waxes and treatments that no competitor has ever fully replicated. The visible tells you status. The invisible tells you who owns the narrative, and that owner is not the craftsman who signed the name. In the early 1980s, Bernard Arnault was not a name anyone associated with luxury. In 1984, he purchased a bankrupt textile company called Vuitton, and most observers saw a real estate play. They saw buildings and assets to strip. They missed the prize hiding inside the company's holdings. the original Louis Vuitton Maison itself. That acquisition became the foundational stone of everything that followed. A bankrupt textile firm bought for its hidden treasure the way a collector might buy a neglected watch at auction for the rare movement ticking inside a tarnished case. He did not want the dial. He wanted what made the dial move. If you have ever walked into a Louis Vuitton store and felt that the space itself was performing for you, you already understand the first rule of this empire. The product is never just the product. The floor is a stage. The lighting is a mood. The sales associate's measured pace is choreography, and you are the audience. You hear the soft click of a lock on a briefcase, a sound engineered to feel substantial, and then you feel the weight of a sales associate's gaze as you lift a wallet you have no intention of buying. That gaze communicates something. It tells you that you are being assessed, catalogued, understood. That is not an accident. That is the movement engaging. Bernard Arnault is not merely the chief executive of LVMH, though that is the title he holds. The reality is more intricate. Arnault and his family control the group through a web of holding structures and voting rights, a mechanism that allows them to steer without owning every share outright. It is the balance wheel of the entire machine. In April of 2023, LVMH became the first European company to surpass a valuation of $500 billion. $500 billion. To put that in perspective, that is not a company that sells luggage. That is a financial force that happens to sell luggage, champagne, perfumes, and watches, among dozens of other things, all feeding a single engine. A number at large stops being a number and becomes a quiet hum you can almost hear beneath every boutique door. Subscribe so we can walk deeper into that hum together, tracing the invisible scaffolding that holds up the names you collect. Type engine in the comments if you have ever felt, even for a second, that a purchase was less an exchange and more a signal your identity is sent out into the world. The empire thrives on signals that have been studied quietly for decades. Consumer psychology research has repeatedly examined how self-concept and social comparison influence the willingness to purchase luxury goods. We buy not just objects, but reflections of who we believe we are, polished and held up for the world to verify. Studies have found that brand prestige increases perceived product value and desirability. And research has shown that scarcity can increase luxury desirability by enhancing perceived exclusivity. You want it more because you believe you cannot have it. The conglomerate does not just manufacture goods, it manufactures the conditions of your wanting. Have you ever bought something not for its function, but for the story it tells on your arm, or on your wrist, or in the curve of your hand? That story is not yours. It was written by committees, refined by focus groups, and priced to reinforce a hierarchy that you did not design. The dial shows you the hour. It does not show you the calendar of decisions behind it. By the late 80s, Arnault's accumulation of power was described by one report as owning more than 40% of the shares in LVMH. Not a majority of the shares, in a simple counting sense, but enough, combined with voting structures and family holdings, to command the direction absolutely. Control never requires total ownership. It requires leverage. In 2022, the group reported revenue of 79.2 billion euros, up 23% from the previous year. The growth was not a fluke, it was a strategy. Each brand in the portfolio was positioned to capture a different tier of desire, from the aspirational to the untouchable, and each one fed the ecosystem of the others. What the casual observer never sees is the financial engineering beneath the products. Louis Vuitton does not report its own revenue separately from LVMH. There is no line item, no quarterly disclosure that says this is exactly how much the monogram made. Analysts estimated sales at $20 to $25 billion, but the number is never confirmed. That opacity is the ultimate luxury. What cannot be measured cannot be copied. What cannot be passed cannot be deconstructed. The brand that made its name on trunks designed to protect fragile cargo understands something profound about protecting its own secrets. The less anyone knows, the more they must trust. You expect a diamond, a single flagship brand that shines alone in the market. What you find instead is a diamond mine, and the owner keeps the map hidden in holding company registries and annual reports dense enough to discourage even determined readers. The brilliance you admire is real. The extraction process is invisible. In 2023, LVMH reported 86.2 billion euros in revenue across all its houses. But that number, however staggering, tells you very little about how the machine operates. The group employs more than 196,000 people and operates in 81 nations. A workforce the size of a small city, coordinated toward a single silent purpose. Now consider the psychological dimension again. Luxury consumption has been studied as a signal of status, an identity display in consumer psychology research. That signal is the mainspring of the entire industry. Without the human need to communicate who we are through what we possess, the whole structure would collapse into simple manufacturing. The collector who sees only the dial buys the wrong watch for the rest of his life. The collector who reads the movement buys one watch that lasts 2 centuries. The same principle applies here. The shopper who sees only the bag buys a starter set. The observer who reads the structure sees the machinery of desire itself, and the view changes everything. You scroll through an annual report on a polished screen, hearing no one around you, the numbers feeling remote and abstract. But you can almost touch the tension between disclosure and concealment. Every page reveals something. Every footnote conceals more. The document is not a window. It is a vault door, slightly ajar. The annual report is a vault door, slightly ajar. Inside, the machinery of desire turns silently. Subscribe to keep walking with us through these half-open doors into the invisible structure behind every object you admire. If you felt that tension between disclosure and concealment, write the word vault in the comments below. Remember the 75 brands. Here is where they become a single silent swan. Each house maintains its own creative director, its own ateliers, its own identity, and yet they all report upward into a hierarchy where decisions about which brands grow and which are starved are made far from any storefront. The annual general meeting is a spectacle of calm authority. A man stands before shareholders in Paris, surrounded by voting rights concentrated through family structures, and he smiles. He does not need to shout. He does not need to persuade. The arithmetic is already settled before the first hand is raised. That is the quiet power of the well-engineered caliber. The story you have never heard is not hidden because it is inaccessible. It is hidden because it lives in securities filings, in holding structures, in the deliberate separateness of brand identities that prevents any outsider from seeing the full map. The empire prefers it that way. Opacity is not a flaw. It is the design. In the next chapter, we go deeper into the one brand that even rival conglomerates failed to acquire. The one Arnault has been circling for decades. Some say it is the only jewel that matters now, the missing component that would complete the movement. The dial stays silent on the subject, but the mechanism is never still. What does this mean for your own eye, your own collection of perceptions? You have been trained to see the surface, to read the monogram as the entirety of the story. But the deeper truth is that the monogram is a punctuation mark in a sentence you have never been shown. A single gear in a movement far too complex for any storefront. The stock ticker blinks without a sound as Paris sleeps. Numbers in euros charting an empire that no one sees in a window display. The canvas was always just the canvas. The real craft lay in the weave behind it, in the structure that holds 75 brands in perfect tension, in the quiet machinery of desire itself. You now see what the crowd misses. You have felt the weight of the mechanism behind the monogram, and that changes how you will look at every luxury object from this moment forward. The question is not whether the empire is visible. The question is whether you will learn to read the invisible, because there are always more layers to peel, always another door in the workshop that does not open to the public.